Hello again, college football fans. It is November 12th, Sunday, the day after week 11 in college football, and the objective has been met. The SEC championship has been set. It is going to be Alabama versus Georgia, December 2nd in Atlanta for that championship. Now, as far as the Alabama-Kentucky game goes, my prediction was pretty way off as far as the score goes. I think I predicted a 27-10 Alabama victory. We wound up winning that one 49-21, 28-point victory as opposed to a 17-point victory. Obviously, more points were scored by both teams. One of the reasons that was sort of on purpose because I hoped that we would be able to continue our offensive explosiveness that we found in the second half of the Tennessee game. But I wasn't going to just go ahead and assume that was going to be the case against a better defense. And Kentucky does have a better defense than LSU. Pretty much everybody in the SEC outside of Vandy and maybe Mississippi State has a better defense than LSU. So I wasn't ready to go ahead and say that Milroe had completely turned the corner that he has turned now. And I'm willing to say that. But actually, looking back onto the season, I'm still more impressed with what he did against Texas A&M because I think that's the best defense that we've played since Texas to date, and it's the best defense that we will have played until we play Georgia in that SEC championship game. But Kentucky is a step up from LSU, and I just wanted to be sure. But Jalen Milroe has exceeded every expectation that I had for him. I mean, when he came up last year and took over for Bryce in that emergency start against Texas A&M, I thought to myself, oh boy, here we go, another Jalen that can run and can't throw. But Milroe can throw so much better at Alabama than Hurts ever was able to do. And, I talked early in the season about how Saban never really tailors his offenses around players, and he didn't do it for Jalen Hurts, and I didn't feel like he was going to do it for Jalen Milroe. Now, I've noticed that a lot of the announcers act as though that is what has happened, that Tommy Rees has tailored the offense around what Milroe can do, but I don't think that's the case. I think that the reason that the RPOs and the reason that Milroe's legs have been so effective since the Tennessee game is because defenses are allowing him to do that because they fear his arm. Defenses, when Jalen Milroe was at Alabama, I'm not talking about what he did at Oklahoma, I'm not talking about what he's done in the NFL, but when he was at Alabama, he just could not make the reads quick enough. And, in those days, the offensive line that he stepped behind was ready to go, probably the best in college football right out of the gate. He had all day, all the time, and was just never consistently able, especially against good defenses. Now, yeah, he ripped up, mediocre teams and defenses all the time. But with Milroe, his running is more effective. Now, first of all, I think he's got a gear that Hurts never had running the ball as far as speed goes. But Milroe's running game was always neutralized because by the end of his freshman year, defenses were catching on to the fact that they didn't have to fear his arm. He was never able to make the deep throws the way Milroe was out of the gate. He was never able to make those, intricate timing passes and the intermediate and shorter stuff. And Milroe's already getting better at that, but he doesn't have to be all that great at that because instead of making those intermediate throws, his legs are allowing him, like you saw in the LSU game, the second half against Tennessee, and yesterday against Kentucky, because they fear his arm, those running lanes are opening up for him in a way that they never did for Hurts. So just all of that to say that Milroe is a better quarterback than I ever expected him to be. And I don't think it's because any special tailoring of the offense. Now, I'm sure him and Rees have gotten together and talked about what works best for him and what doesn't work best. But they're still basically running the pro-style Nick Saban offense that he's wanted to run since the beginning at Alabama. But the reason that the running game and everything else is opening up for him is because the defenses actually do fear his arm. And one of the reasons, and I go back to that Texas A&M game, that was the big game because they didn't allow him to run. That's what their game plan was going to be. We're going to put it on the arm of Milroe, and he delivered. He had 300-something yards passing in that game, and it was brilliant. And now that has been established, His legs are going to be able to be utilized the way that they have the last few weeks now. And the offensive line's problems seems to be over at this point. It's been now, dating back to the first half of the Tennessee game, it's been 10 quarters now of hardly any mistakes, hardly any of those false start penalties that they were plagued with earlier in the season. They're holding up so much better on pass protection now, and I think even their run blocking has improved during that time. So I'm ready to go ahead and say that all of those problems that plagued us on offense early in the season seems like we've ironed all of that out. And I think, a lot of that is what we knew would have to happen, which is Caden Proctor is going to have to mature. The 5 guys on the offensive line are going to just have to get experience working together. They now have that. It's like Saban has always said, freshmen, by the end of their freshman year, are no longer freshmen. And you see that also from Caleb Downs. I mean, going back to the Texas game, that was Caleb Downs and Caden Proctor's first real start in college. I mean, I know they had the Middle Tennessee game, but come on, that does not really count as valuable experience when you're talking about a real big-time college opponent, the way Texas was. Now, looking forward to the Georgia-Alabama game, I'm not ready to say that we're to the point where we won't be able to know until after that game's over with if we're equal to that task, because they're probably the best team in the country. We're in the discussion for that, along with Michigan and Ohio State and Florida State and Washington and Oregon and Texas, really. But right now I would just go ahead and say Georgia looks like probably the toughest out there on anybody's schedule. And so I'm not ready to say that, all our problems are solved and we're ready to be a national championship contender. Because first of all, it's like I've been saying all year long to this point, not enough teams are losing to really even know whether or not we're going to be in that college football playoff discussion. I mean, if Washington and Florida State wins out and the Big Ten champion wins out, then if Alabama beats Georgia, then probably the SEC is going to be out of that game. But I honestly think that the Georgia-Alabama game transcends the national championship. Whether they get into the college football playoff or not, everybody knows that that's going to be the game to determine who the big dog, who the king of college football is right now. I mean, it's Georgia at the moment, but if Alabama beats Georgia and the circumstances keep the SEC out of the college football playoff, I think everybody, in their heart of hearts is going to recognize that the SEC champion is the best team, best program in college football right now, regardless of what happens in that college football playoff, because the playoff committee continues to insist that they are trying to just pick the 4 best teams out there, and I think everybody knows that is a crock, and that's fine. I don't think that necessarily should be the criteria, because it's too vague to really make that your criteria. I mean, they are picking the teams that have the best, most deserving resumes to get into that playoff, and I think that's what they should be doing. If there are 4 undefeated Power 5 conference champions, that's who should be in there. And I mean, even if Georgia and Alabama are clearly 2 of the best 4 teams in the country, and they weren't able to win all of their games and other teams were able to do that, then, that's the structure of the game that we have set up. I think that's the protocol that needs to be met. And if somebody has a blemish on their record and other teams don't, I'm sorry, college football is too big for us to just allow a committee to decide who the 4 best teams are. And that's the way they've been going at it the entire time during the 4-team playoff. And I think that's the way that they should continue to do it. But just back to that Kentucky game really quickly, just to wrap all of this up, where Alabama's at right now. They've won the West, which was the only goal I think that anybody should have had for this team coming into this season. Now, we've still got Auburn on the horizon. There's going to be plenty of time to talk about that game. Going to Jordan-Hare is a nightmare, especially for Alabama. We know that. Um, but for right now, we've got the West, which, just reflecting on where we started out this season after that Texas loss and then the South Florida game, that's what prompted me to start making these videos again, because everybody was just sure it was over. And I felt like I needed to remind everyone, as well as myself, that, we've been through these sort of kind of reset moments before in the Nick Saban era. We pointed back to 2014, 2015, and everything worked out then, and it has appeared to have worked out now. Obviously, our goal is to win the national title every year, but, regarding what I just said about all that, we just cannot start looking towards that just yet. So many things still have to happen. We've still got 2 weeks of a regular season. We've still got conference championship week to get through. And after all that is said and done, if we're in the playoffs, then we'll start talking about, our chances of actually winning the big enchilada for the 2023 season. But right now, I just want to reflect on how fun this season has been. Nick Saban has said it over and over now, and all the announcers have been saying that how much fun he's had coaching this team. But just watching this team progress has really been a joy, because we haven't seen anything like this at Alabama since 2014, 2015. And I think this year was even better, because back then it was just the quarterback situation really that we had to iron out. This year, there was the offensive line. Coming into this season, the defense had been so lackluster for 4 or 5 years during the Pete Golding reign of terror that I always talk about. And we had question marks there. I think everybody was confident that the defense was going to have stepped it up a little bit this season, and they've proven over and over again that they have, I think. And watching the O-line improve and Jalen Milroe improve behind them week in and week out has been so much fun. And it's just being an Alabama fan, the expectations are always so high. It was fun to kind of get knocked down a little bit early in the season and watch us have to get back up off the mat and be sitting here, with 2 games left in the regular season, with only 1 loss, SEC West champions. We're going to get our shot at Georgia. Plenty of time to talk about that one. Plenty of time to talk about the Iron Bowl. But right now, this is basically an off week that we're heading into. I know we've got Chattanooga, but and maybe one day I'll talk about how disgraceful it is that we started doing these garbage games this late in the season, the week before rivalry week and everything. But right now, you just got to tip your cap to Nick Saban. Another great coaching performance from him. And to these guys who obviously are very coachable, very willing to learn, willing to, wait their turn, willing to be benched like Milroe was, if that's actually what happened during that South Florida week. Nobody really knows what was going on. I still maintain that, the coaching staff just wanted to see what options they had at quarterback, because at that time, Milroe was looking like he wasn't going to be able to do the things that they needed him to do. All of those questions have been answered up to this point. Will he be able to do them well enough to win the SEC championship and, go on to bigger and better things? Those questions still remain to be seen. And like I said earlier in the video, they won't be answered until after the SEC championship game has been played. So there's really no use in getting into all of that stuff right now. As far as the conference goes this week, it was fun watching the Missouri-Tennessee game. I think Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz has really proven themselves well this season, and it'll be interesting to see what his career looks like moving forward here, whether he'll stay at Missouri for a while and see this thing out, or whether he'll move on to greener pastures. That'll be an interesting thing to watch. The big news today, Jimbo Fisher apparently has been fired from Texas A&M. Whether or not they have the guy that they want to replace him with already in mind, nobody knows that yet. But I wouldn't just assume that that's the case. I mean, when Auburn fired Gus Malzahn, they went ahead and hired Brian Harsin, which was probably the worst not probably, Brian Harsin is the worst hire Auburn has had in my entire life. Because when I was born, it was Pat Dye. Terry Bowden was a good hire for a while. Tommy Tuberville was a great hire until, that train ran out of steam. Same goes for Gus Malzahn. And Brian Harsin is the only dud that Auburn has hired in my entire lifetime. So don't just assume that because they've fired Jimbo Fisher down there in College Station and paid off that huge $75 million or whatever it was buyout, don't just assume that they've got the guy waiting in the wings. We may have another Brian Harsin situation down there at Texas A&M. But, that's all going to unfold as we move forward here. Speaking of Auburn, they trashed Arkansas. And I think you may be seeing, two coaches passing each other, one out the door and one on his way in the door at Auburn. Sam Pittman, I don't know what Arkansas is going to do, but things are not looking good for him. This is the kind of season that gets coaches fired in the SEC. So we'll have to be on the lookout for that. And where did that come from Auburn, that offensive performance? I mean, Hugh Freeze has turned a corner, and that definitely makes that Iron Bowl look a lot more interesting coming up than it did a couple weeks ago. Even as well as Alabama's playing, we all know that Jordan-Hare House of Horrors is going to be interesting for the Crimson Tide come the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Around the country, I said in the Upset Watch video that I didn't really see a whole lot of opportunities for upsets. I went ahead and picked Utah to upset Washington because I felt like with all these big games that we had on the slate last week that somebody would get knocked off. And turns out it was nobody. So that's where we're at, that's why I say chaos really hasn't seemed to come the way everybody expected it to, the way it normally does. Now, we still do have 2 weeks left, so a lot of things can happen before that playoff, those playoff teams need to be set. So this is a really interesting time, but it could wind up being the cleanest. I mean, if Georgia wins out, Florida State wins out, the Big Ten champion wins out, and Washington all wins out, then that'll be the cleanest college football playoff set that we've had the entire 10-year history of the 14 playoff. Because that's just, there you go. Georgia, Washington, Ohio State, or Michigan, whoever wins that one, and Florida State, and that's it. And then everybody else will just be on the outside looking in, and you'll have a really good star-studded slate in those New Year's Six Bowls like you have never seen before during this little era that we're in. This is the last year of it. So lots of questions have been answered, but still a ton that need to be moving forward. And I'm planning on making maybe some different sort of videos, kind of like I did during Alabama's official off week. This is their unofficial off week. So be on the lookout to see what comes out from here on during the rest of this season. And we're going to be coming back at you with more. Thanks for watching.